Oh boy. Alrighty, party peoples of the interwebs, Viva Fry, former Montreal litigator turned current Florida rumbler in Lugano, Switzerland, on the river that enters the Lugano Lake, and it's kind of beautiful. And the news of the day, for those of you who are waking up in the East, is that Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, has managed to squander $75 million on a provincial ad attacking Trump's tariffs by using a clip from Reagan out of context and not in its entirety, and thus twisting the very meaning of the clip. It has enraged Donald Trump so much that he announced on Truth Social that all trade talks with Canada are off thanks to a premier of a province, Doug Ford. Now, for those who haven't seen the ad, I'm going to play the ad after I describe it a bit. $75 million. Now, I read that and I said that has to be a typo. That had to have cost $75,000. How the heck does an ad cost $75 million? Now, we know that it's not in the production of the ad, which means that it probably has to go to the platforms on which that ad is run. And I think this reeks of money laundering. Now, before we get any further, just enjoy the ad in all its glory. $75 million, and now has cost Canada billions because all trade talks with Donald John Trump are off.
When someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. But over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. Throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. America's jobs and growth are at stake.
Now, if you think I'm exaggerating or that I must have made a mistake, I thought so as well. I had to go to CTV News. This is what CTV News describes as the cost of that ad, and I'm reading from CTV News. The government of Ontario launched earlier this month a television ad, which is said to have cost 75 million Canadian dollars, about $54 million US, and is expected to run through January on networks including Newsmax, Fox, and NBC. The ad quotes from Reagan's April 25th, 1987, quote, radio address to the nation on free and fair trade. Quote, when someone says, quote, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, end quote, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time, end quote. The ad, which splices together quotes from Reagan's speech, says, quote, then the worst happens, markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. Now, the only problem with that is that the quote itself, taken out of context, ignores the very end of that speech, in which President Reagan was actually imploring the general public to support his ventures to impose specific tariffs, because Congress was apparently going to legislate away the ability for the president to impose tariffs, and his entire call to action was to allow him to apply tariffs when needed, as he thought would be necessary, because the legislation that they were contemplating itself was a form of protectionism that was going to hurt America. The very reason why Reagan put that speech out, and its very essence, was to defend the president's ability to impose tariffs when he believed necessary. And now all poop has hit the fan. As Time is reporting, Trump took to Truth Social and said, yeah, all trade talks are off with this country that takes clips out of context, uses speeches without permission to bastardize them from their original meaning, and to interfere with American policy. From Time magazine, Trump announces trade negotiations with Canada, quote, terminated, end quote, over Ontario Reagan ad. President Donald Trump said the U.S. has, quote, terminated, end quote, trade negotiations with Canada over an advertising campaign against tariffs that allegedly misused an audio clip from former President Ronald Reagan. And then we go to the Truth Social post itself, and it says the Ronald Reagan Foundation has just announced that Canada has fraudulently used an advertisement, which is fake, featuring Ronald Reagan speaking negatively about tariffs. The ad was for $75 million. They only did this to interfere with the decision of the U.S. Supreme Court and other courts. Tariffs are very important to the national security and economy of the USA. Based on their egregious behavior, all trade negotiations with Canada are hereby terminated. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President DJT. And here you have the statement from the Reagan Foundation if you want to pause and read it at your leisure. Now, what's amazing is that when you watch the last 55 seconds, give or take, of Reagan's address to the nation, his speech, it's abundantly clear what he was asking for was to preserve the right of presidents to impose tariffs. He may have had his observations of tariffs in general, but that was 30 some odd years ago, and the world might have learned a little bit about the effectiveness of tariffs. But set that aside. Reagan made his observations on tariffs at large, but the very reason of that speech was to defend the ability, the right, the executive authority of the president to impose tariffs when deemed necessary. And what's his face, Doug Ford, takes that out of context in a $75 million ad that he planned on running in the United States. Why isn't this foreign interference? I don't know. But I said it before and I'll say it again. Canada has made itself a national security threat to these United States of America. While it's doing this, it's cozying up with China, thinking China is going to make better economic allies with Canada than the US. And even most egregious, there were people on Twitter defending this, saying it wasn't taken out of context. Here's the full clip. One such account, I had to go check his profile, was a journalist at the New York Times, Washington Post, and others, who says this entire clip was in context. It was exactly what Reagan said. And lo and behold, he cut his clip 55 seconds short. Benjamin Ryan at Ben Ryan Writer, independent reporter, New York Times, NBC News, Washington Compost, The Atlantic, New York Sun. Well, that says a lot. And in his post, he writes, the Ontario ad featuring Ronald Reagan criticizing tariffs has so angered Trump, he has cut off trade negotiations with Canada. Trump called the ad, quote, fake, end quote. Here is the full video of Reagan's remarks about tariffs. And then he goes on to post a video that is 2 minutes and 17 seconds long. Now, the only problem is you go watch Benjamin's video, the full video, and you'll notice that it cuts shortly after Ronald Reagan says, I've never forgotten about those jobs. And he cuts out the last 55 seconds, which was Ronald Reagan imploring people to support his efforts to cause the president to retain the ability to tariff when he deems necessary.
Now, it hasn't always been easy. There are those in the Congress, just as there were back in the 30s, who want to go for the quick political advantage, who risk America's prosperity for the sake of a short-term appeal to some special interest group, who forget that more than 5 million American jobs are directly tied to the foreign export business, and additional millions are tied to imports. Well, I've never forgotten those jobs, and on trade issues, by and large, we've done well. Well, I've never forgotten those jobs, and on trade issues, by and large, we've done well. In certain select cases, like the Japanese semiconductors, we've taken steps to stop unfair practices against American products, but we've still maintained our basic long-term commitment to free trade and economic growth. So, with my meeting with Prime Minister Nakasone and the Venice Economic Summit coming up, it's terribly important not to restrict a president's options in such trade dealings with foreign governments. Unfortunately, some in the Congress are trying to do exactly that. I'll keep you informed on this dangerous legislation because it's just another form of protectionism, and I may need your help to stop it. Remember, America's jobs and growth are at stake. Until next week, thanks for listening, and God bless you.
I call him out in a post, Viva Fry, at the Viva Fry. It actually takes gall to be so dishonest, at Ben Ryan Writer. Quote, here is the full video of Reagan's remarks about tariffs, end quote, 3 question marks. Wow, you literally cut out the last 55 seconds, which was the most important part, in which Reagan speaks of the need for a president to have the power to impose tariffs. I show exactly where you cut your video, and I added the last 55 seconds that you cut from your, quote, full video, end quote. How are you not ashamed of yourself? Serious question. I have yet to get an answer to that question, and I don't expect one anytime soon, but the reality is this is insanity. You've got Doug Ford out there ruining everything for everybody, not just a $75 million squander of taxpayer dollars of his province, but now he has effectively ruined trade negotiations with the United States of America for all of Canada, to the point where you now have Alberta again saying, hey, we didn't sign up for this to have these Ontario jackasses ruin everything for all of us. Let us out of Canada. And you've got a renewed push to have Alberta separate from Canada, to have none of this nonsense, because Alberta is probably one of the most lucrative and profitable provinces in Canada, being built by the other provinces who are tanking all of Canada so that they can cozy up with China. Oh yeah, and before I forget, make sure you like, share, subscribe, turn on notifications if you like my content, or if you just like the beautiful Swiss scenery. The hills are alive with the sound of vlogging. So that is that. I'm going to be moderating a panel between the CEO of Rumble, the CEO of Tether, and the CEO of MoonPay this afternoon, Swiss time. So by the time you're watching this, it might have already passed, but be sure to go check it out on Rumble. If you like what I do, you know what to do. Most importantly, exercise, eat healthy, sunlight, talk to people in real life, and enjoy the sounds of nature. Booyah.